The morning sun cast long shadows across the military academy's training grounds as Maya Chen adjusted her oversized uniform for the 100th time. At 19, she stood barely 5 feet tall, her slight frame swimming in the regulation fatigues that seemed designed for soldiers twice her size. The other cadets towered over her, their muscular builds and confident strides making her feel like a child playing dress-up in her father's clothes. Maya had dreamed of joining the military since she was 12 years old, inspired by stories her grandfather told about heroes who fought not with brute strength, but with intelligence and heart. Her grandfather, a decorated war veteran, had always told her that true strength came from within, not from the size of one's muscles or the volume of one's voice. But, as she stood in formation with her fellow recruits, surrounded by athletes and former high school football stars, Maya wondered if her grandfather's wisdom was just wishful thinking. The other recruits had noticed her immediately. Jake Morrison, a 6'2" former college wrestler, had dubbed her Mouse on the first day. The nickname stuck, spreading through the barracks like wildfire. During meals, Maya sat alone while the others shared stories of their athletic achievements and physical prowess. During physical training, she struggled to keep up with push-ups and pull-ups that came easily to her peers. The drill sergeants, while not openly mocking her, clearly doubted whether she belonged in their program. "Shun!" Sergeant Williams barked during morning calisthenics. "You're holding up the entire formation. If you can't handle basic training, maybe you should consider a different career path." Maya's cheeks burned with embarrassment as the other recruits snickered. She pushed herself harder, but her arms trembled as she attempted another push-up. Her body simply couldn't match what the others could do effortlessly. Night after night, she returned to her bunk exhausted and demoralized, questioning whether she had made a terrible mistake. The academy's academic portions were different. In strategy classes, Maya's mind came alive. While her classmates struggled with complex tactical scenarios, Maya could visualize battles like chess games, seeing patterns and possibilities that others missed. Her professors noticed her analytical skills, often calling on her to explain complicated maneuvers or historical battles. But even these small victories felt hollow when she could barely complete the physical requirements that seemed so fundamental to military life. 3 months into training, rumors began circulating about an upcoming visit from General Marcus Stone, a legendary figure known for his uncompromising standards and fierce temperament. Stone had earned his reputation through decades of service, rising from enlisted ranks to become one of the youngest generals in military history. He was known for his intimidating presence and his ability to spot weakness instantly. Stories of his harsh assessments were legendary throughout the military, and cadets who failed to meet his standards often found their careers cut short. Maya had heard the stories about General Stone's visits to other academies. He would observe training sessions, interview select cadets, and make recommendations that could make or break military careers before they even began. The thought of facing his scrutiny made Maya's stomach churn with anxiety. She knew that her physical limitations would be immediately apparent to someone of his experience and reputation. As the day of General Stone's arrival approached, the academy buzzed with nervous energy. Drill sergeants pushed the cadets harder, expecting perfection in every exercise and formation. Maya's struggles became even more pronounced under the increased pressure. During a particularly grueling obstacle course session, she fell behind the group, her small hands unable to maintain grip on the rope climb while her legs shook with exhaustion. "Chen is going to embarrass the entire academy," Jake Morrison whispered loudly enough for others to hear. Maybe she should fake an injury and skip the general's visit. The comment stung because Maya had considered exactly that. The thought of humiliating herself in front of General Stone, and, by extension the entire academy, kept her awake at night. She imagined his cold stare, his dismissive comments, the way he would undoubtedly question why someone so obviously unfit for military service had been admitted in the first place. But Maya's grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. He had faced his own challenges during his military service, overcoming prejudice and doubt through determination and intelligence rather than physical dominance. He had taught her that true strength wasn't about overpowering others, but about persevering when everything seemed hopeless. Those lessons had sustained her through the darkest moments of her training. The night before General Stone's arrival, Maya sat in the academy library, studying tactical manuals and historical accounts of military campaigns. While her fellow cadets prepared by doing extra push-ups and practicing their parade formations, Maya immersed herself in the intellectual aspects of military strategy. She read about great leaders who had overcome physical limitations through brilliant tactical thinking, commanders who had won battles through cunning rather than brute force. As she read, Maya began to understand something that her physical training had obscured. Military leadership wasn't just about being the strongest or fastest soldier. It was about making critical decisions under pressure, understanding complex situations, and inspiring others to achieve objectives that seemed impossible. These were areas where her analytical mind and determined spirit could shine, even if her body couldn't match her peers in raw physical ability. The morning of General Stone's visit dawned gray and overcast, matching the mood of nervous anticipation that permeated the academy. Maya woke early, carefully preparing her uniform and mentally rehearsing responses to questions the general might ask. She had decided that regardless of her physical limitations, she would face this challenge with dignity and honesty. If General Stone dismissed her, at least she would know she had given her best effort. As the cadets assembled for morning formation, Maya caught sight of General Stone for the first time. He was exactly as imposing as his reputation suggested, tall, broad-shouldered, with steel-gray eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. His uniform was immaculate, his bearing commanding, and his expression stern. When he spoke to the assembled academy staff, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Maya felt small and insignificant in his presence, just another face in a sea of hopeful military recruits. She tried to stand straighter, to project confidence she didn't feel, but she was acutely aware of how she must appear to someone of General Stone's stature and experience. The morning's activities would include individual assessments, and Maya knew that her moment of reckoning was approaching rapidly. As General Stone began his inspection of the cadets, moving down the line with practiced efficiency, Maya's heart pounded in her chest. She watched him interact with other recruits, noting his sharp questions and penetrating stare. Some cadets wilted under his attention, while others seemed to grow more confident. Maya wondered which category she would fall into when her turn came. The general paused at Jake Morrison, engaging him in a brief conversation about his wrestling background and fitness scores. Morrison's chest swelled with pride as he recounted his athletic achievements, clearly basking in the general's attention. Maya couldn't help but compare Morrison's confident bearing with her own nervous uncertainty. The contrast between them seemed to embody everything she felt was wrong with her chosen path. When General Stone moved on from Morrison, Maya realized he was only 3 cadets away from reaching her position in the formation. Her mouth went dry, and she could feel sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool morning air. This was the moment that would define her military future, and she felt utterly unprepared despite months of training and preparation. As General Stone approached, Maya tried to channel her grandfather's strength and wisdom. She thought about all the late nights spent studying, all the extra hours in the library, all the times she had pushed through physical exhaustion to complete required tasks. She might not be the strongest or fastest cadet, but she had earned her place through determination and intelligence. That had to count for something. General Stone stopped in front of the cadet next to Maya, a tall woman named Sarah Phillips who had been a track star in college. Phillips answered his questions with crisp confidence, clearly impressing the general with her knowledge and bearing. Maya watched the interaction, noting how Phillips maintained eye contact and spoke clearly despite the obvious pressure of the moment. Then, General Stone took one final step, bringing him directly in front of Maya. His gray eyes studied her for a long moment, taking in her slight frame and nervous expression. Maya felt as though he could see every doubt, every moment of weakness, every time she had struggled to keep up with her peers. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken judgment. "Cadet Chen," General Stone said finally, his voice carrying across the training ground with military precision. "I've heard interesting things about you from your instructors." Maya's heart sank. She was certain that the interesting things were euphemisms for her obvious physical shortcomings and struggles with the more demanding aspects of military training. She had imagined this moment countless times, but facing it in reality was far more intimidating than any scenario she had envisioned. "Yes, sir," Maya managed to reply, her voice steadier than she had expected despite her internal turmoil. General Stone's expression remained unreadable as he continued his assessment. Your academic scores are exceptional, particularly in strategic analysis and military history. However, I understand you've struggled with some aspects of physical training. The words hit Maya like physical blows. Here it was, the moment she had dreaded, when her limitations would be laid bare in front of everyone. She could feel the eyes of her fellow cadets on her, some sympathetic, others undoubtedly relieved that they weren't in her position. Maya braced herself for the dismissal she felt certain was coming. Yes, sir, she repeated, unsure of what else to say. There was no point in making excuses or trying to minimize her struggles. General Stone would see through any attempt at deception immediately. The general nodded slowly, as if confirming something he had already suspected. Maya waited for him to deliver the verdict that would end her military aspirations before they had truly begun. She thought about calling her grandfather to explain why she wouldn't be following in his footsteps, about finding a new career path that better suited her obvious limitations. Instead, General Stone surprised her by asking, "What do you think is the most important quality in a military leader, Cadet Chen?" The question caught Maya off guard. She had expected criticism or dismissal, not a philosophical discussion about leadership. For a moment, her mind went blank as she tried to process this unexpected turn in their conversation. I believe it's the ability to make difficult decisions under pressure while considering the welfare of those under your command, sir, Maya replied, drawing on her extensive reading and study of military history. General Stone's eyebrows raised slightly, the first change in his stern expression since he had begun speaking with her. Interesting perspective. Can you give me an example of such leadership from military history? Maya felt a spark of confidence as they moved into territory where she felt more secure. During World War II, General Matthew Ridgway took command of the 8th Army when morale was at its lowest point. Rather than relying solely on superior firepower, he focused on understanding his soldiers' needs and rebuilding their confidence through strategic victories that minimized casualties while achieving objectives. And what made Ridgway's approach effective? General Stone pressed, clearly testing the depth of her knowledge. He understood that true strength comes from inspiring others to exceed their perceived limitations, sir. Physical dominance was less important than intellectual leadership and genuine concern for his troops' welfare. As Maya spoke about military strategy and leadership philosophy, she felt her nervousness beginning to fade. This was material she had studied extensively, concepts she understood at a deep level. For the first time since General Stone's arrival, she felt like she might be demonstrating her actual capabilities rather than highlighting her limitations. The conversation continued for several more minutes, with General Stone asking increasingly complex questions about tactical decision-making and historical military campaigns. Maya found herself growing more animated as they discussed topics she was passionate about, her earlier fear replaced by genuine enthusiasm for the subject matter. Finally, General Stone stepped back, his assessment apparently complete. Maya had no idea what conclusions he had drawn from their conversation, but she felt she had at least demonstrated her intellectual preparation for military service. Whether that would be enough to overcome her obvious physical shortcomings remained to be seen. "Thank you, Cadet Chen," General Stone said formally, already turning his attention to the next recruit in line. Maya was left standing at attention, uncertain whether their interaction had gone well or poorly. The general's expression had remained largely unreadable throughout their conversation, giving her no clear indication of his assessment. She could only hope that her knowledge and enthusiasm had made some positive impression despite her obvious physical limitations. As General Stone continued his inspection of the remaining cadets, Maya's mind raced with analysis of their conversation. She replayed every question and answer, searching for clues about his opinion of her potential. The uncertainty was almost worse than outright rejection would have been, leaving her suspended between hope and despair. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of demonstrations and presentations. Maya participated as required, but her mind remained focused on her interaction with General Stone. She wondered if he was even now discussing her case with Academy officials, determining whether she deserved continued training or should be counseled toward a different career path. During the lunch break, Maya sat alone as usual, picking at her food while mentally preparing for whatever announcement might come. The other cadets seemed to sense that something significant was developing, and the usual chatter was subdued. Everyone knew that General Stone's visit could result in immediate changes to their training program and individual futures. It was then that the announcement came over the Academy's public address system. All cadets were to report to the main auditorium immediately for a special presentation by General Stone. Maya's stomach dropped as she realized this might be the moment when her military career would officially end. She had survived the initial assessment, but perhaps the general had saved his final judgments for this public forum. As the cadets filed into the auditorium, Maya took a seat in the back, hoping to avoid drawing further attention to herself. General Stone stood at the podium, his bearing as commanding as ever, while Academy officials arranged themselves behind him. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation as everyone waited to hear what pronouncements would emerge from his visit. Maya closed her eyes briefly, trying to prepare herself emotionally for whatever was coming. She thought again about her grandfather's teachings about inner strength and perseverance. Even if her military dreams were about to end, she could face that outcome with dignity and use the lessons she had learned to find success in whatever path lay ahead. General Stone approached the microphone, and the auditorium fell completely silent. Maya opened her eyes and focused on his stern face, ready to accept whatever judgment he was about to deliver. This moment would define not just her immediate future, but how she would remember this attempt to follow in her grandfather's footsteps. She was determined to face it with courage, regardless of the outcome. General Stone cleared his throat and surveyed the assembled cadets with his characteristic intensity. Maya felt her heart hammering against her ribs as she waited for him to speak, certain that her name would be among those he would single out for criticism or dismissal. During my time here today, I have observed your training, reviewed your records, and spoken with many of you individually, General Stone began, his voice carrying easily through the auditorium's sound system. I have seen impressive physical abilities, dedication to training, and promising potential among this group of future military leaders. Maya allowed herself a small breath of relief. Perhaps he would focus on praising the stronger cadets and avoid mentioning her struggles publicly. She could handle private disappointment better than public humiliation. However, General Stone continued, and Maya's momentary relief evaporated. I have also observed some concerning attitudes that need immediate correction. There seems to be a belief among some of you that military excellence is solely determined by physical prowess and athletic ability. The general's eyes swept across the auditorium, and Maya could swear they lingered on Jake Morrison and his circle of athletic friends. Several cadets shifted uncomfortably in their seats, perhaps recognizing themselves in his description. This mindset is not only incorrect, it is dangerous, General Stone declared, his tone growing more stern. Military history is filled with examples of physically impressive soldiers who failed when leadership was required, and smaller individuals who achieved extraordinary success through intelligence, determination, and moral courage. Maya found herself leaning forward slightly, intrigued by the direction of the general's comments. This was not what she had expected to hear, especially given her assumption that her physical limitations had made a negative impression during their earlier conversation. I want to share with you an incident that occurred during my own service, one that fundamentally changed how I evaluate military potential, General Stone said, moving away from the podium to address the cadets more directly. 23 years ago, I was a young captain leading a reconnaissance unit in hostile territory. My team consisted of some of the most physically capable soldiers I had ever commanded. The auditorium was completely silent now, every cadet hanging on the general's words. Maya felt a strange anticipation, as though this story might somehow be relevant to her own situation, though she couldn't imagine how. We had been operating behind enemy lines for 3 days when we encountered an unexpected situation, General Stone continued. Intelligence reports had indicated the area was lightly defended, but we found ourselves facing a much larger enemy force than anticipated. My soldiers were tired, outnumbered, and running low on supplies. The general paused, his eyes distant as he recalled the memory. Among my unit was Corporal James Chen, a man who barely met the minimum physical requirements for military service. The other soldiers often joked about his slight build and questioned whether he belonged in a combat unit. I'll admit that I had my own doubts about his capabilities. Maya's breath caught in her throat. Chen was not an uncommon surname, but the description sounded remarkably similar to her own situation. She wondered if this could possibly be a coincidence, or if General Stone knew more about her background than she had realized. When we found ourselves surrounded and outgunned, it was Corporal Chen who proposed a solution that saved all our lives, General Stone revealed. While my physically stronger soldiers were focused on preparing for a direct confrontation, Chen had been quietly observing enemy patrol patterns and identified a weakness in their defensive positions. The general's voice grew warmer as he continued the story, clearly still impressed by the memory after more than 2 decades. Chen's plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Rather than engaging the enemy directly, he suggested a tactical withdrawal that would draw them into a narrow canyon where their numerical advantage would be neutralized. His analysis of the terrain and enemy behavior was flawless. Maya felt goosebumps rising on her arms as she listened to the story. The parallels to her own situation were unmistakable, and she began to wonder if this was more than coincidence. Could General Stone possibly know about her family history? The mission was a complete success, General Stone announced. We eliminated a significant enemy threat while suffering no casualties ourselves. Corporal Chen's strategic thinking and attention to detail had accomplished what brute force could never have achieved. I recommended him for decoration and fast-track promotion to officer training. Several cadets turned to look at Maya, apparently making the same connection she had noticed. Jake Morrison's expression showed clear confusion, as though he couldn't understand why the general was telling this particular story to their group. James Chen went on to become a highly decorated officer, serving with distinction in multiple campaigns, General Stone continued. His physical limitations never disappeared, but his intellectual capabilities and moral courage more than compensated for what he lacked in raw strength. He proved that true military excellence comes from character and intelligence, not just physical ability. The general's eyes found Maya in the audience, and she felt a jolt of recognition as their gazes met. There was something in his expression that confirmed her growing suspicion about the connection between this story and her own presence at the academy. I learned an invaluable lesson from serving with Corporal Chen, General Stone said, his attention returning to the broader audience. I learned that judging military potential based solely on physical characteristics is not only unfair, it's tactically stupid. Some of the most effective leaders I have known were individuals who succeeded despite physical disadvantages, not because of physical gifts. Maya felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes as the full implication of the story became clear. Her grandfather had never mentioned serving with a future general, had never told her about any specific incidents that had earned him recognition. He had always been modest about his military service, focusing on general lessons rather than personal achievements. This brings me to the main purpose of my visit today, General Stone announced, his tone becoming more formal again. I have reviewed the records of every cadet in this academy, and I am disappointed by some of the attitudes I have observed during my time here. The mood in the auditorium shifted as cadets realized that praise might be followed by criticism. Maya tensed again, uncertain whether she was about to be singled out despite the encouraging story about her grandfather. There is a disturbing tendency among some of you to judge your fellow cadets based on superficial characteristics rather than actual performance and potential, General Stone continued. I have witnessed mockery disguised as humor, exclusion justified by arbitrary standards, and a general lack of respect for the diversity of talents that make effective military units. Jake Morrison and several other cadets looked distinctly uncomfortable now, clearly recognizing themselves in the general's description. Maya remembered all the snide comments, the casual exclusion, the assumption that her presence somehow diminished the quality of their training program. This behavior is not only unacceptable from a moral standpoint, it demonstrates a fundamental misunderstanding of military effectiveness, General Stone declared. Real combat situations require diverse skills and perspectives. Units that embrace this diversity consistently outperform those that prioritize superficial uniformity. The general's voice took on a harder edge as he continued his critique. I have observed cadets in this academy who possess impressive physical abilities but lack the intellectual flexibility to adapt when situations change. Conversely, I have observed cadets whose physical limitations are more than offset by superior analytical skills and tactical understanding. Maya realized that General Stone was essentially defending her without mentioning her name directly. The message was clear to everyone present: but delivered in a way that avoided singling her out for special attention or potential embarrassment. Military leadership requires the ability to recognize and utilize the strengths of every team member, General Stone emphasized. Leaders who can only value one type of capability will consistently underperform against those who understand how to leverage diverse talents effectively. The general paused to let his words sink in before continuing. I want to be absolutely clear about something. Physical fitness is important in military service, and every soldier must meet minimum standards for health and capability. However, physical fitness is just one component of military effectiveness, and it is not the most important component. Maya felt a surge of validation hearing these words from such a respected figure. Her struggles with physical training had made her question whether she belonged in the military at all, but General Stone was articulating a broader view of military value that included her strengths as well as acknowledging her limitations. Intelligence, creativity, moral courage, analytical thinking, and the ability to inspire others under pressure are equally important qualities, General Stone listed. A military that ignores these capabilities in favor of simple physical metrics will find itself outmaneuvered by more thoughtful opponents. The general's eyes swept across the auditorium again, and Maya felt he was addressing each cadet individually. I expect the culture of this academy to reflect these values going forward. Mockery based on physical appearance or capability will not be tolerated. Exclusion based on superficial characteristics will be grounds for dismissal. Several cadets shifted nervously, apparently realizing that their behavior toward Maya and others might have more serious consequences than they had anticipated. Maya felt a mixture of relief and apprehension, grateful for the general's intervention but concerned about potential backlash from her peers. Excellence in military service comes in many forms, General Stone continued. Some of you will excel through physical prowess and combat effectiveness. Others will contribute through strategic thinking and tactical innovation. Still others will demonstrate leadership through moral courage and the ability to inspire troops under impossible circumstances. The general's voice became more personal as he continued. During my career, I have had the privilege of serving with extraordinary individuals who exemplified each of these types of excellence. Without exception, the most effective units were those that combined diverse capabilities rather than seeking uniformity. Maya thought about her grandfather's stories, understanding now that he had been part of exactly the kind of diverse unit that General Stone was describing. She wondered how many other family stories had omitted important details out of modesty or a desire to focus on lessons rather than personal achievements. I want to challenge each of you to examine your own assumptions about military excellence, General Stone said, addressing the cadets directly. Ask yourselves whether you are judging your peers fairly, whether you are recognizing the full range of capabilities that surround you, and whether you are contributing to a culture that brings out the best in everyone. The general's challenge hung in the air as cadets contemplated their own behavior and attitudes. Maya could see some of her peers looking thoughtful, perhaps reconsidering their treatment of her, and others who didn't fit the conventional military stereotype. Real leadership begins with understanding that your success depends on the success of your entire unit, General Stone emphasized. Leaders who can identify and develop the unique strengths of every team member will consistently achieve superior results compared to those who try to force everyone into the same mold. Maya felt a growing sense of hope as she listened to General Stone's words. For the first time since beginning her military training, she felt that her contributions might be valued rather than merely tolerated. The general was articulating a vision of military service that had room for her analytical mind and determined spirit. I have one final point to make before concluding my visit, General Stone announced, and the auditorium fell silent again. During my observations today, I have identified several cadets who exemplify the kind of diverse excellence I have been describing. These individuals demonstrate that military potential comes in many forms. Maya's heart began racing again, uncertain whether she was about to be praised or criticized in front of the entire academy. She noticed that several other cadets were also looking nervous, apparently wondering if they might be singled out for attention. Rather than embarrass anyone with individual recognition, I will simply say that I am impressed by the range of talents represented in this academy, General Stone continued. Your instructors know who you are, and I encourage you to continue developing your unique capabilities while working to meet all required standards. Maya felt both relief and slight disappointment that she wouldn't receive specific recognition, but she understood the wisdom of General Stone's approach. Public praise might have created resentment among her peers, while his general comments provided validation without singling her out for potential backlash. In closing, I want to remind all of you that military service is ultimately about something larger than individual achievement, General Stone said, his voice taking on an inspiring tone. You are preparing to serve your country and protect those who cannot protect themselves. This responsibility requires the best from each of you, regardless of what form that excellence takes. The general returned to the podium for his final remarks. I expect great things from this academy and from each of you individually. Remember that true strength comes from within, that intelligence and courage are just as valuable as physical ability, and that the most effective military units are those that embrace the full spectrum of human capability. As General Stone concluded his remarks and left the stage, the auditorium erupted in applause. Maya clapped along with everyone else, but her mind was racing with the implications of what she had just heard. The general's words had fundamentally reframed her understanding of her own potential and value as a future military officer. When the cadets were dismissed, Maya walked slowly back toward the barracks, lost in thought about the afternoon's revelations. She felt as though she had been given permission to see herself differently, to value her intellectual strengths as legitimate contributions to military excellence rather than poor substitutes for physical capability. As she walked, Maya became aware that Jake Morrison was approaching from behind. She tensed, expecting some kind of confrontation or sarcastic comment about the general's speech. Instead, Morrison fell into step beside her, his expression thoughtful rather than mocking. Hey, Chen, Morrison said quietly, using her actual name for the first time since they had met. Can I ask you something? Maya nodded, curious about what had prompted this unexpected civility from someone who had been consistently dismissive of her presence at the academy. That story the general told, about Corporal Chen, Morrison continued. That was your grandfather, wasn't it? Maya considered her response carefully before nodding again. I think so. He never told me much about his specific service, but the details match what I know about him. Morrison was quiet for a moment before speaking again. My grandfather served in Vietnam. He used to tell me that the smartest guys were often the ones who kept everyone else alive. I guess I forgot that lesson somewhere along the way. The admission surprised Maya, who had expected Morrison to remain skeptical of General Stone's message. Physical strength is still important, she replied diplomatically. The general didn't say it wasn't. No, but he made it clear that it's not the only thing that matters, Morrison acknowledged. I've been thinking about some of the things we've said, the way we've treated you and some of the others. It wasn't fair, and it wasn't smart. Maya felt a complex mixture of emotions at Morrison's apparent change of heart. She was grateful for the acknowledgement, but also wary of trusting this sudden transformation. Months of exclusion and mockery couldn't be erased by a single conversation, no matter how sincere it seemed. I appreciate you saying that, Maya replied carefully. I know I have to work harder than most people to meet the physical standards. I've never expected special treatment. That's just it, though, Morrison said, stopping in his tracks. Maybe we should have been offering help instead of making things harder. The general was right about military units working better when everyone contributes their strengths. Maya stopped as well, turning to face Morrison directly. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe we could help each other, Morrison replied. You're obviously way smarter than I am when it comes to strategy and tactics. Maybe you could help me with some of the academic stuff, and I could help you with the physical training. The offer was tempting, but Maya remained cautious. Why now? What changed? Morrison looked uncomfortable but answered honestly. Listening to the general talk about your grandfather, seeing how wrong we've been about what makes a good soldier. And, honestly, feeling pretty ashamed about how we've acted. Maya studied Morrison's face, looking for signs of insincerity or hidden motives. What she saw was genuine regret and what appeared to be a sincere desire to make amends for past behavior. Okay, Maya said finally. We could try working together. But it has to be real partnership, not you feeling sorry for the weak girl. Morrison smiled, the first genuinely friendly expression he had ever directed toward her. Deal. And, Chen? For what it's worth, I don't think you're weak at all. Weak people would have quit by now. As they resumed walking toward the barracks, Maya reflected on how dramatically her situation had changed in the span of a single afternoon. General Stone's intervention had not only validated her place at the academy, it had apparently sparked a broader reconsideration of how the cadets viewed each other and themselves. The evening ahead would bring new challenges and uncertainties, but, for the first time since arriving at the academy, Maya felt optimistic about her future in military service. She had found her voice and her value, and she was ready to prove that her grandfather's lessons about inner strength had prepared her for whatever lay ahead. The weeks following General Stone's visit brought a noticeable shift in the academy's atmosphere. Maya found herself experiencing something she had never expected during her military training: acceptance from her fellow cadets. The change wasn't immediate or universal, but it was real and growing stronger each day. Jake Morrison had kept his word about their partnership, and their study sessions became a regular part of both their routines. Maya helped him navigate complex strategic scenarios and historical analyses, while Morrison provided guidance on physical training techniques and nutritional strategies that could help her build strength more effectively. The arrangement benefited both of them, with Morrison's grades improving significantly and Maya beginning to see measurable progress in her fitness assessments. Other cadets gradually joined their informal study group, creating a collaborative environment that had been missing from the academy's competitive culture. Sarah Phillips, the track star who had impressed General Stone during his inspection, brought her expertise in endurance training. David Kim, a former computer programmer who had struggled with leadership exercises, contributed his analytical skills to tactical problem-solving sessions. Maya discovered that her role in these group dynamics was often as a translator between different perspectives. Her academic background helped her explain complex concepts in accessible terms, while her own struggles with physical training gave her empathy for others facing their own challenges. She found herself becoming a bridge between the academically gifted cadets and those whose strengths lay in more practical areas. The instructors noticed the change as well. Sergeant Williams, who had been particularly critical of Maya's early performance, began incorporating more diverse assessment methods into the training program. Physical fitness remained important, but strategic thinking, problem-solving under pressure, and team leadership were given equal weight in evaluating cadet progress. Maya's confidence grew as she found herself excelling in these expanded evaluation criteria. During a complex war games exercise, she was chosen as team leader for a mixed unit of 12 cadets. The scenario involved defending a strategic position with limited resources against a numerically superior attacking force. While her teammates focused on traditional defensive preparations, Maya spent time studying the terrain and analyzing the attacking force's likely strategies. She noticed patterns in their previous exercises and identified potential weaknesses that could be exploited through unconventional tactics. Instead of trying to meet them head-on, we're going to make them come to us on our terms, Maya explained to her team during the planning phase. They expect us to defend from the obvious high ground position, so we're going to let them take it. Several of her teammates looked skeptical, particularly Tom Bradley, a former football player who favored more direct approaches. You want to give up the strategic advantage? That doesn't make sense. Maya spread out a detailed topographical map, pointing to specific features that supported her strategy. The high ground looks advantageous, but it's actually a trap in this scenario. Limited escape routes, vulnerable supply lines, and poor visibility of the surrounding area. If we let them take it, we can control everything they need to maintain their position. She outlined a complex plan that involved strategic withdrawals, coordinated flanking maneuvers, and psychological warfare designed to demoralize the attacking force. The strategy required precise timing and careful coordination, but it could potentially neutralize their numerical disadvantage. Morrison nodded approvingly as he studied the plan. It's risky, but it could work. The key will be making sure everyone executes their part exactly on schedule. Phillips added her perspective on the physical demands of the strategy. The movement patterns will be challenging, but manageable if we pace ourselves correctly. Maya's right that we can't win a direct confrontation. As the exercise began, Maya felt the familiar nervousness that accompanied high-pressure situations, but it was tempered by confidence in her analysis and trust in her team. She had spent hours studying not just the terrain and tactical possibilities, but also the strengths and limitations of each team member. The attacking force, led by Jake Henderson, one of the Academy's top-performing cadets, advanced exactly as Maya had predicted. They seized the obvious high ground position quickly and efficiently, setting up defensive positions that would have been nearly impregnable against a conventional assault. Maya's team implemented their withdrawal according to plan, appearing to retreat in disarray while actually taking carefully prepared positions that controlled the attackers' supply routes and communications. The initial phase went smoothly, with Henderson's force believing they had gained a decisive early advantage. The second phase proved more challenging. Maya's plan required her team to split into 3 smaller units, each responsible for disrupting different aspects of the attacker's position. Coordination became critical as radio communications were limited to maintain the element of surprise. Phillips led a unit focused on harassment of supply lines, using her speed and endurance to strike quickly and withdraw before the attackers could respond effectively. Kim's group concentrated on electronic warfare, disrupting communications and creating confusion about the defenders' true positions and intentions. Maya retained direct command of the smallest unit, which had the most complex mission, convincing Henderson's force that the main defensive position was located somewhere it wasn't. This required a combination of misdirection, false radio transmissions, and carefully staged movements designed to draw attention away from their teammates' actual activities. The strategy worked better than Maya had dared hope. Henderson's force spent precious time and resources pursuing phantoms while their actual situation deteriorated steadily. Their communications became increasingly frustrated as reports came in about supply disruptions and mysterious contacts in areas that were supposed to be secure. "They're not where they're supposed to be," Henderson's voice crackled over the radio intercepts that Kim's unit was monitoring. "We control the high ground, but they're hitting us everywhere else." Maya felt a surge of satisfaction as she listened to the confusion in the attacking commander's voice. Her analysis of Henderson's psychological profile had suggested he would become increasingly aggressive when faced with unexpected situations, potentially making tactical errors in his frustration. The prediction proved accurate. Henderson ordered a series of aggressive patrols designed to locate and destroy the elusive defensive forces, but these operations only weakened his main position by dividing his forces. Maya's team was able to coordinate their responses, always staying one step ahead of the search parties while maintaining pressure on the attackers' vulnerable points. The exercise's climax came when Henderson finally realized he had been outmaneuvered and attempted to withdraw to a more defensible position. Maya had anticipated this possibility and positioned her team to make withdrawal extremely costly, forcing Henderson to choose between maintaining his untenable position or accepting significant casualties during retreat. Henderson chose retreat, but Maya's forces were ready. The carefully planned pursuit inflicted maximum damage while minimizing exposure to counterattack. By the time the exercise concluded, Henderson's numerically superior force had been effectively neutralized through strategic maneuvering rather than direct confrontation. The after-action review was conducted by Colonel Martinez, the Academy's chief tactical instructor. Maya stood before the assembled participants, still hardly believing that her unconventional strategy had succeeded so completely. "Cadet Chen," Colonel Martinez began, "can you explain the thinking behind your initial decision to abandon the high ground?" Maya took a deep breath before responding. "Sir, I analyzed the terrain and realized that the obvious defensive position was actually disadvantageous given our resource constraints. Rather than fight for a position we couldn't effectively hold, I chose to make the attackers commit to defending it while we controlled everything they needed to maintain their advantage." Colonel Martinez nodded approvingly. "And how did you coordinate the multiple simultaneous operations required by your strategy?" "I assigned each team leader responsibilities that matched their individual strengths," Maya explained. Cadet Phillips led the mobility-focused operations, Cadet Kim handled the technical aspects, and I retained command of the deception elements. Clear communication protocols and predetermined decision points allowed us to maintain coordination without constant radio contact. The colonel turned to address the broader group. "This exercise demonstrates several important principles of military leadership. First, effective strategy often involves doing the unexpected rather than the obvious. Second, understanding your own capabilities and limitations is just as important as understanding your opponent's. Third, diverse skills and perspectives can create opportunities that uniform capabilities cannot. Henderson, to his credit, accepted the critique gracefully. I fell into the trap of assuming that numerical superiority would be decisive, he admitted. I didn't adequately consider how Chen's team could use their mobility and intelligence advantages to neutralize our numbers. Maya felt a complex mixture of pride and humility as she listened to the analysis of her success. The victory was satisfying, but she was also aware that it had been achieved through team effort rather than individual brilliance. Each member of her team had contributed essential skills that made the strategy possible. After the formal review concluded, Maya found herself surrounded by congratulating classmates and instructors. The attention was gratifying, but also somewhat overwhelming for someone who had grown accustomed to being overlooked or criticized. Sergeant Williams approached her as the crowd began to disperse. Outstanding work, Chen. That was exactly the kind of innovative thinking we hope to see from future officers. Thank you, sir, Maya replied. I had an excellent team to work with. Williams smiled. True, but leadership involves getting the best from your team, and you certainly accomplished that. I think General Stone would be proud to see how you've developed since his visit. The mention of General Stone reminded Maya of how much had changed since that pivotal day weeks earlier. She had gone from questioning whether she belonged at the academy to leading successful military operations. The transformation felt almost surreal. As Maya walked back to the barracks that evening, she reflected on the lessons she had learned about leadership and teamwork. Her grandfather's teachings about inner strength had proven prophetic, but she had discovered that inner strength was most effective when combined with the diverse capabilities of trusted teammates. Morrison caught up with her as she reached the dormitory building. That was incredible, Chen. I've never seen Henderson so completely outmaneuvered. It was a team effort, Maya replied, but Morrison shook his head. It was your vision and your leadership that made it possible. We all contributed, but you were the one who saw the possibilities that the rest of us missed. Maya considered his words carefully. I think I'm good at seeing patterns and possibilities, but that's only valuable if I have teammates who can execute the plans. You can't win battles with strategy alone. True, Morrison agreed. But you also can't win them without good strategy. What you did today was exactly what General Stone was talking about. You found a way to use everyone's strengths while minimizing our weaknesses. As they entered the building, Maya noticed that several of their classmates were engaged in animated discussions about the day's exercise. Her name came up frequently in these conversations, usually in contexts that would have been unimaginable just a few weeks earlier. Chen's strategy was brilliant, she heard Tom Bradley saying to a group near the common area. I thought she was crazy when she suggested giving up the high ground, but it worked perfectly. Another voice added, Did you see how she coordinated those 3 different operations simultaneously? I couldn't have kept track of all those moving pieces. Maya felt a warm glow of satisfaction at hearing these comments, but also a sense of responsibility. Her success in the exercise had elevated her status among her peers, and she knew that maintaining that respect would require continued excellence and humility. That night, as she prepared for bed, Maya called her grandfather to share the news of her successful exercise. His voice brightened considerably when she described her strategic thinking and leadership experience. You're learning the most important lesson of military service, he told her. Success comes not from being the strongest or fastest, but from understanding how to bring out the best in yourself and others. I keep thinking about the story General Stone told about your service, Maya said. You never mentioned saving your unit through strategic thinking. Her grandfather chuckled. That's because the important part wasn't what I did, but what I learned about leadership and teamwork. Stone understood that, which is why he became such an effective general. The best leaders are those who recognize and develop the potential in others. Maya reflected on her grandfather's words as she drifted off to sleep. She had proven to herself and others that she could succeed in military leadership, but she was also beginning to understand that true leadership involved much more than personal achievement. The next morning brought news that would test her growing confidence in unexpected ways. Colonel Martinez announced that the Academy would be hosting a prestigious Inter-Academy competition in just 3 weeks. Teams of cadets from military academies across the region would compete in a series of challenges designed to test every aspect of military preparedness. Maya learned that she had been selected as one of the team leaders for their academy's delegation. The honor was recognition of her recent success, but it also meant she would be competing against the best cadets from other institutions, many of whom had years more experience than she did. The competition would include physical challenges, strategic simulations, leadership assessments, and team coordination exercises. Maya knew she would need to continue growing as both an individual leader and a team builder if she hoped to represent her academy successfully. As she contemplated the challenges ahead, Maya felt a familiar mixture of nervousness and excitement. The shy, uncertain cadet who had arrived months earlier was still part of her, but that person was now balanced by growing confidence and proven capability. She thought about General Stone's words about diverse excellence and her grandfather's lessons about inner strength. The upcoming competition would test everything she had learned about leadership, strategy, and teamwork. More importantly, it would challenge her to continue growing into the kind of leader she aspired to become. Maya was no longer the weak girl that some had dismissed when she first arrived. She was becoming a military leader who understood that true strength came from intelligence, character, and the ability to inspire others to achieve more than they thought possible. The Inter-Academy competition would be her chance to prove that lesson to a much broader audience. The Inter-Academy competition arrived with crisp autumn weather and an atmosphere of intense anticipation. Representatives from 8 military academies had gathered at the regional training center, bringing their most promising cadets to compete in challenges that would test every aspect of military leadership and capability. Maya stood with her team at the opening ceremony, wearing her academy's dress uniform and feeling the weight of representing her institution. Around her, cadets from other academies displayed impressive physical presence and confident bearing. Many appeared to be natural athletes, their posture and movement suggesting years of competitive sports and physical training. General Stone had returned to serve as the competition's senior judge, along with other distinguished military officers from across the region. His presence added gravity to the event and reminded Maya of how much her life had changed since their first encounter months earlier. The competition format included 4 major categories: individual physical fitness assessments, strategic planning exercises, team leadership challenges, and a culminating multi-day field operation that would test all skills simultaneously. Points would be awarded in each category, with the highest scoring academy earning recognition as the regional leader in military education. Maya had been assigned to lead her academy's team through the strategic planning and leadership challenges, while Morrison and Phillips would anchor their efforts in the physical components. The arrangement reflected the collaborative approach they had developed over the preceding weeks. The first day's events focused on individual assessments. Maya watched nervously as her teammates competed in physical fitness tests against cadets who seemed to have been training for these specific challenges their entire lives. Morrison performed admirably in strength events, while Phillips excelled in endurance competitions, but several other academies fielded teams with superior athletic capabilities. Maya's own performance in the physical assessments was respectable but not exceptional. She had improved significantly since the beginning of her training, but her scores remained in the middle range compared to the elite competition she faced. Some observers from other academies seemed puzzled by her inclusion on what was clearly intended to be each institution's strongest team. Captain Rebecca Torres from the Maritime Academy made a comment that Maya overheard during a break between events. Interesting that some academies are bringing academic specialists to an athletic competition. Strategy is important, but physical capability usually determines the winner in these events. The comment stung because it echoed Maya's own concerns about her ability to contribute meaningfully to her team's success. Despite her recent achievements, she still felt the familiar anxiety about whether her intellectual strengths could compensate for her physical limitations when competing against elite opponents. That evening, as teams prepared for the next day's strategic challenges, Maya studied the competition guidelines and began developing preliminary approaches to the announced scenarios. The strategic component would involve planning responses to 3 different military situations: a humanitarian relief operation, a counterinsurgency mission, and a conventional defensive action. Maya realized that success would require not just individual strategic thinking, but the ability to convince judges that her plans could be effectively executed by real military units. This meant considering not only tactical brilliance, but also practical constraints like logistics, personnel capabilities, and resource limitations. She worked late into the night, developing detailed operational plans that accounted for multiple variables and contingencies. Her approach emphasized flexibility and adaptation rather than rigid adherence to predetermined strategies. Drawing on lessons learned from her grandfather's stories and her own recent experiences, Maya focused on plans that leveraged diverse capabilities rather than relying solely on conventional strengths. The second day's strategic planning exercise took place in a conference room equipped with maps, communication equipment, and access to detailed intelligence briefings. Maya found herself competing against 7 other team leaders, each representing their academy's best strategic thinking. The first scenario involved coordinating relief efforts in a disaster-stricken area with limited infrastructure and potential security threats. Maya's competitors generally focused on establishing strong perimeter security and efficient distribution of supplies through centralized command structures. Maya took a different approach, emphasizing decentralized operations that could adapt to rapidly changing conditions. Her plan incorporated local knowledge and resources, established redundant communication networks, and created flexible response capabilities that could address unexpected challenges without requiring approval from central command. The key to effective humanitarian operations is speed and adaptability, Maya explained during her presentation to the judging panel. Centralized command structures are efficient under ideal conditions, but disasters create chaos that requires local decision-making authority and flexible resource allocation. General Stone listened intently as Maya outlined her approach, occasionally asking questions that tested the depth of her analysis. Other judges seemed impressed by the comprehensiveness of her planning, but Maya couldn't tell whether they found her unconventional strategies credible or merely interesting. The second scenario presented a counterinsurgency situation in an urban environment with civilian populations and limited intelligence about enemy capabilities. Most competitors focused on establishing control through superior firepower and technological advantages. Maya's plan emphasized intelligence gathering, community engagement, and surgical operations designed to minimize civilian casualties while maximizing the psychological impact on insurgent forces. Her strategy required longer implementation timelines but promised more sustainable results with fewer long-term complications. Counterinsurgency operations are fundamentally about winning hearts and minds, Maya argued. Military superiority can provide temporary tactical advantages, but lasting success requires addressing the underlying conditions that support insurgent activities. The final scenario involved defending a strategic position against a conventional military assault. This was the most traditional of the 3 challenges, and most competitors developed variations of standard defensive doctrines that emphasized fortified positions and concentrated firepower. Maya remembered her recent success in the Academy Wargames and applied similar principles on a larger scale. Her plan involved trading space for time, using mobile defense tactics to exhaust attacking forces while preserving defender capabilities for decisive counterattacks. Static defenses are predictable and vulnerable to concentrated assault, Maya explained. Mobile defense allows smaller forces to engage larger enemies on favorable terms by choosing when and where to fight while denying the attacker clear objectives. When the strategic planning presentations concluded, Maya felt cautiously optimistic about her performance. She had articulated her reasoning clearly and demonstrated thorough understanding of the complex factors involved in each scenario. Whether the judges would value innovative thinking over conventional approaches remained to be seen. The third day brought team leadership challenges that would test each academy's ability to work together under pressure. Maya found herself responsible for coordinating her team's response to a simulated crisis situation that required rapid decision-making and effective communication under stress. The scenario involved a training accident that had resulted in simulated casualties and equipment failures. Teams had to assess the situation, coordinate rescue operations, manage resources, and maintain mission capability while dealing with time pressure and incomplete information. Maya's team faced the additional challenge of being smaller than most competitors, with only 6 members compared to the 8 or 9 fielded by other academies. This numerical disadvantage forced them to be more efficient and coordinated in their response. Drawing on her experience leading the Wargames exercise, Maya quickly assessed her team members' individual strengths and assigned responsibilities that maximized their collective capabilities. Morrison took charge of the physical rescue operations, Phillips coordinated communications and logistics, Kim handled technical assessments and equipment management, and the other team members filled specialized roles based on their particular skills. Maya retained overall command while also serving as the primary liaison with evaluation officials and coordinating with simulated external support resources. The role required her to maintain situational awareness across all team activities while making strategic decisions about resource allocation and priority setting. The exercise unfolded rapidly, with new complications being introduced regularly to test the team's adaptability and leadership under pressure. Maya's team responded smoothly to each challenge, their earlier experience working together proving invaluable in maintaining coordination despite the chaotic environment. "Chen, we've got a communication breakdown with the medical evacuation helicopter," Phillips reported during one particularly intense phase of the exercise. "They can't land at the primary extraction point due to equipment debris." Maya quickly consulted her map and identified an alternative landing zone that would require moving the casualties a greater distance but could accommodate the helicopters safely. "Morrison, can your rescue team handle the additional movement with the equipment we have available?" Morrison assessed the situation briefly before nodding. "It'll be tight, but we can manage it. Give me 8 minutes." The team executed the modified plan flawlessly, demonstrating the kind of seamless adaptation that Maya had learned was the hallmark of effective military units. Their performance caught the attention of evaluation officials, who noted their ability to maintain efficiency despite their numerical disadvantage. As the leadership challenges concluded, Maya felt proud of her team's performance but remained uncertain about how they compared to the larger, more physically impressive teams from other academies. The final component of the competition would determine the overall winner, a 3-day field operation that combined all previous elements into a comprehensive test of military capability. The field operation scenario involved establishing and maintaining a forward operating base while conducting reconnaissance patrols and responding to simulated enemy contact. Teams would be evaluated on their operational planning, tactical execution, resource management, and adaptability to changing conditions. Maya's team was assigned a defensive sector that included difficult terrain and limited natural resources. Other teams received more advantageous positions, leading Maya to suspect that the assignment was designed to test whether smaller teams could overcome environmental disadvantages through superior planning and execution. Maya spent the first evening conducting detailed reconnaissance of their assigned area, identifying both vulnerabilities and opportunities that might not be apparent from map studies alone. She discovered several positions that could provide tactical advantages if properly utilized, as well as potential resource sources that weren't marked on the official maps. Her operational plan emphasized mobility and intelligence gathering over static defense, similar to the strategies that had proven successful in her earlier exercises. The team would establish a primary base in a concealed location while maintaining observation posts and patrol routes that maximized their situational awareness. The plan required careful coordination and constant communication, but it offered the possibility of achieving superior results despite their numerical and positional disadvantages. Maya briefed her team thoroughly, ensuring that everyone understood not just their individual responsibilities, but also how their actions contributed to the overall strategy. The 3-day operation tested every aspect of military training that Maya had received. Physical endurance was crucial as the team maintained continuous operations with minimal rest. Strategic thinking was essential as they adapted to new intelligence and changing tactical situations. Leadership skills were vital as Maya guided her team through periods of uncertainty and stress. Maya discovered that the combination of her intellectual preparation and months of physical training allowed her to maintain effectiveness throughout the demanding exercise. While she still couldn't match the raw athletic performance of some competitors, her improved fitness and tactical understanding enabled her to contribute meaningfully to every aspect of the operation. The exercise culminated in a simulated enemy assault on their position, requiring Maya's team to implement their defensive plans under intense pressure. The attacking force was led by Captain Torres from the Maritime Academy, the same officer who had questioned Maya's inclusion on her team earlier in the competition. Maya's mobile defense strategy proved highly effective against the conventional assault tactics employed by the attacking force. Her team's superior knowledge of the terrain and carefully prepared positions allowed them to inflict significant simulated casualties while maintaining their own operational capability. The decisive moment came when Maya identified an opportunity to transition from defense to counterattack, using the attackers' extended positions against them. Her team executed a coordinated assault that effectively neutralized the attacking force while securing their own operational objectives. Captain Torres later acknowledged the effectiveness of Maya's unconventional tactics. "I underestimated the importance of terrain knowledge and strategic flexibility," she admitted during the post-exercise debriefing. "Your team's performance was impressive throughout the operation." The final awards ceremony took place on a crisp evening with all participants assembled in dress uniforms. Maya stood with her team, proud of their performance but uncertain about the judges' final assessment. They had competed against larger, more physically impressive teams while employing unconventional strategies that might not align with traditional military thinking. General Stone stepped to the podium to announce the competition results. Maya felt the familiar nervousness that accompanied moments of judgment, but it was tempered by confidence in her team's effort and performance. This year's competition demonstrated exceptional quality across all participating academies, General Stone began. "Every team showed dedication, skill, and the kind of military potential that gives me confidence in our future leadership." The general announced the winners in each individual category, with Maya's academy placing respectably in most areas and achieving particular recognition for strategic innovation and team coordination. Maya felt satisfaction in these achievements, even if they hadn't dominated any single category. "The overall winner of this year's regional competition," General Stone announced, "is the team that demonstrated the most comprehensive understanding of modern military requirements. They showed that effective leadership combines physical capability, intellectual preparation, strategic thinking, and the ability to inspire others to achieve extraordinary results." Maya held her breath as the general paused before continuing. "The winner of this year's competition is the Central Military Academy, led by Cadet Maya Chen." The announcement hit Maya like a physical shock. Her team erupted in celebration around her, but she felt momentarily stunned by the unexpected recognition. She had hoped for a respectable showing, but winning the entire competition had seemed impossible given their apparent disadvantages. General Stone continued his remarks as Maya tried to process what had happened. Cadet Chen's team demonstrated that military excellence comes in many forms. They overcame numerical and physical disadvantages through superior preparation, innovative thinking, and exceptional teamwork. Their performance exemplifies the kind of leadership our military needs for the challenges ahead. As Maya walked to the podium to accept the award on behalf of her team, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. Months earlier, she had been the weak girl who struggled to complete basic physical training and questioned whether she belonged in military service at all. "Thank you, sir," Maya said as she accepted the trophy from General Stone. "This award belongs to my entire team and the instructors who taught us that strength comes in many forms." General Stone smiled as he shook her hand. "Your grandfather would be very proud of what you've accomplished. You've proven that the lessons he learned about leadership and courage continue to be relevant for new generations of military officers." In the audience, Maya could see her teammates beaming with pride and other competitors applauding respectfully. The moment felt surreal, like the culmination of a transformation she couldn't have imagined when she first arrived at the academy. Later that evening, as the celebration continued and teams prepared for departure the next morning, Maya found herself in a quiet moment with General Stone. She had wanted to thank him personally for the intervention that had changed the trajectory of her military career. "Sir, I wanted to express my gratitude for what you said during your visit to our academy," Maya began. "Your words about diverse excellence and the story about my grandfather changed everything for me and my classmates." General Stone nodded thoughtfully. "You changed things for yourself, Cadet Chen. I simply provided some context that helped others see what was already there." Your grandfather told me years ago that his granddaughter would someday serve with distinction. I'm pleased to see his prediction coming true. Maya felt tears forming in her eyes as she realized that her grandfather had spoken about her to General Stone, probably during one of the veterans' reunions that he attended annually but rarely discussed in detail. He never mentioned knowing you personally, sir. James always preferred to let others discover their own potential rather than opening doors through connections, General Stone explained. But he followed your progress closely and was confident you would succeed once you found your footing. Tonight's victory proves he was right. As Maya returned to her team's celebration, she reflected on the lessons she had learned throughout her military training. Her grandfather's teachings about inner strength had proven prophetic, but she had discovered that inner strength was most powerful when combined with humility, teamwork, and the willingness to help others achieve their own potential. The weak girl who had been mocked and dismissed had become a leader who understood that true military excellence came from bringing out the best in everyone, regardless of their apparent limitations or advantages. She had learned to see strength in many forms and to value the diverse capabilities that made effective teams possible. Maya looked around at her celebrating teammates, each of whom had contributed essential skills to their shared success. Morrison's physical capabilities, Phillips's endurance and determination, Kim's technical expertise, and the unique talents of every team member had combined to create something greater than any individual achievement. The competition had ended with recognition and celebration, but Maya understood that it was really just the beginning of her journey as a military leader. The lessons she had learned about leadership, strategy, and teamwork would guide her through whatever challenges lay ahead in her service career. As the evening wound down and teams began preparing for departure, Maya felt profound gratitude for the experiences that had transformed her from an uncertain cadet into a confident leader. She had discovered that true strength didn't require her to become someone different, but rather to become the best version of who she already was. General Stone had been right when he said that military excellence came in many forms. Maya had found her own form of excellence, one that honored her grandfather's legacy while creating new possibilities for her own future and the futures of those she would lead. The weak girl was gone, replaced by a strong leader who understood that real strength came from within and was multiplied when shared with others. Maya-chan had found her place in the military and proven that heroes come in all sizes, united by courage, intelligence, and the determination to serve something greater than themselves.